It is the end of October. The air in the valleys is warm during the day, but cool at night, carrying with it the scent of drying corn and cut sugar cane. Children play in the plazas with paper skeletons and small skull-shaped sweets. In the markets, grandmothers bargain for flowers and candles, and fathers build simple wooden frames that will soon become family altars. Across the villages and the vast cities alike, there is an invisible stirring. The people sense it without naming it. The time of the Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, draws near. In the hush of the late afternoon, the light seems to bend differently. The sun softens, and shadows grow long across the cobblestones. It feels, to those who know the signs, as though the veil between the living and the dead is becoming thin enough for memories to step across. Long before Mexico had that name, long before Spanish ships brought crosses and bells to its shores, the peoples of the highlands already celebrated death not as an end, but as a continuation. The Aztecs, the Purepecha, and the Mixtec believed that life and death were two parts of one great cycle, like day and night. To die was to return to the earth, to the mother who gave all things. The dead were not feared, they were honored. Their spirits lived in Mictlan, the underworld, not as a place of punishment, but as a resting realm through which souls traveled slowly before being reborn. Each year, the living would leave offerings, ofrendas, of food, drink, and flowers, so that those souls might find their way home and taste once more the sweetness of earthly life. When the Spaniards arrived, they brought All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day from Europe, Christian feasts of remembrance. But in the blending of worlds, something new was born. The ancient and the Christian joined hands, and from their meeting arose what we now call El Dia de los Muertos. Good evening, dear listener. Before we begin, take a slow breath. Let the day drift away like smoke from a candle just blown out. And while the world outside begins to quiet, you and I will travel somewhere far, to a place where the living and the dead meet once a year in gentle celebration. If you haven't yet subscribed, consider doing so. It helps these calm stories continue to reach you each night. And leave a small trace of yourself in the comments, perhaps a candle emoji, or the name of someone you wish to remember. Tonight's story is about memory, about color and faith, and the delicate border between this world and the next. We are going to Mexico, to the land of bright marigolds and slow candlelight, to the night when the dead return home. Unlike the shadowy silence of Western morning, the Day of the Dead in Mexico is filled with color. It is not a sorrowful day, but a day of reunion. People laugh quietly as they decorate graves. Families picnic in cemeteries under strings of marigolds, the cempasúchil, whose golden petals are said to light the way for wandering spirits. The fragrance of copal incense rises in slow spirals into the twilight, carrying prayers upward. Children nibble at tiny sugar skulls with their own names written on them in icing. Reminders that death belongs to all, and therefore none need fear it. At night, candles flicker on every doorstep, and from the hills, the whole village seems to glow like an island of light in a dark sea. The atmosphere is still, tender, and reverent. It is said that at midnight, the souls of the departed find their way back to the homes of their loved ones, guided by the marigolds, the food, and the gentle laughter of those who remember, the Lady of Elegant Death. And yet, in every parade, every poster, and every altar, one figure reigns supreme, the elegant skeleton lady with the wide-brimmed hat, La Katerina. Her story, though modern in form, springs from very old roots. She was first drawn around 1910 by the artist José Guadalupe Posada, who named her La Calavera Garbancera, the garbanzo cellar skull. It was a satire of Mexican women who denied their indigenous heritage and tried to appear European. But through time, her meaning softened, transformed. Today, La Katerina is no longer a mocking symbol. She is the queen of death's calm acceptance, a figure who walks among the living each year to remind them that beneath all masks, beneath the fine dresses, beneath the hats and jewels, we are all the same, skeletons of equal grace. Children see her as both funny and beautiful. Adults see in her smile the gentle reminder that life is brief. But art, memory, and love endure beyond the bones. During the colonial centuries, the Catholic priests tried to confine the ancient rituals within church walls, linking them to All Souls' Day. But the people kept their older faith quietly alive. They held their vigils not just in cathedrals, but in fields, near rivers, and under the wide stars. Even now, in many villages, you will find that the celebrations begin in the home, not the church. On the table stands the Altar de Muertos, a layered offering place covered with embroidered cloths, photographs of ancestors, and little gifts. A cup of hot chocolate, a tortilla, a cigarette, a piece of bread known as pan de muerto. The air carries a mingled fragrance of candle wax, citrus, and copal resin. And as each candle is lit, a whisper runs through the house, soft as breath. They are coming home. According to the old belief, the doors between worlds open on the night of October 31st. On November 1st, the souls of children return first. The angelitos, the little angels, they stay for just one night, finding joy in the toys and sweets placed for them. Then, on November 2nd, come the adults. It is said that if one watches carefully in the candlelight, one might sense a familiar presence, a change in the air, a comforting chill, or the scent of a long-lost perfume. But this is not a ghost story meant to frighten. It is a story of closeness, of family lines that do not break even in death. For one night, the boundary softens, and love, like the marigold's golden petals, lights the path both ways. Everywhere during these days, the air is filled with delicate sounds. The crackle of tissue paper cut into intricate patterns, papel picado, fluttering above the streets like colored spirits of wind. The slow beat of drums as processions move toward the cemetery. The strumming of guitars, the faint laughter of children, the rustle of skirts in the breeze. It is a symphony of memory, quiet, warm, and deeply human. In the center of it all stands the idea that death, far from being an end, is part of the song of life itself. In the last hours before dawn, the candles begin to wane. Wax pools at their bases. Families whisper goodbyes to the unseen guests, telling them to rest peacefully until next year. The marigold petals are gathered, their scent fading into the cool morning air. Birds begin to sing again, and the people, though tired, smile. They have kept their promise to remember. The souls return to their quiet world, carrying with them the warmth of human love. The cycle continues, as it has for centuries. The ancient gods may have changed their names, but their essence still lingers in every prayer, every offering, every petal laid in devotion. The first light of dawn touches the rooftops of Oaxaca and Puebla, where the scent of marigold still hangs in the air. The cemeteries are quiet now. Only the rustle of petals and the whisper of the wind remain. But our story continues, for daylight brings its own kind of remembrance. Today, we will wander through the life of an unusual lady, the most elegant of skeletons, the symbol who turned death into laughter and art. Her name is Katerina. So, make yourself comfortable. Let your breathing slow, and allow the rhythm of this story to carry you gently through time, through paint, through paper, and through memory. Imagine a wide, feathered hat, a little absurd, but striking. It is decorated with flowers and ribbons, perched above a skull with a delicate smile. She's neither frightening nor mournful. Her eyes, though hollow, seem almost amused. This is Katerina, and her story begins not in ancient myth, but in ink. At the turn of the 20th century, around 1910, an engraver named José Guadalupe Posada worked in a small print shop in Mexico City. He carved images into metal plates to print for newspapers. Scenes of daily life, political satire, little jokes about society. His art spoke to ordinary people: the shoemaker, the baker, the market seller. One day, he drew a skeleton woman wearing an extravagant hat, a parody of Mexican upper-class ladies who, in the eyes of the working people, pretended to be European. He called her La Calavera Garbanchera, the garbanzo seller's skull, mocking those who sold chickpeas but denied their indigenous roots. But time, like an artist's hand, would later give her a different name and meaning. When Posada died in 1913, he was little known. He was buried in a common grave, no grand monument, no crowd of mourners. And yet, his art lived on, carried by the prints and posters that had already spread through the streets. A few years later, another artist, Diego Rivera, rediscovered Posada's work. In his vast mural, Sueño de una tarde dominical in la Alameda Central, Dream of a Sunday afternoon in the Alameda Central, Rivera painted the lady skeleton again, this time dressed in elegant Victorian attire, her arm linked with that of a small boy, a self-portrait of Rivera as a child. Beside her stood Posada himself, as though they were walking together through time. It was in this painting that the name La Katerina first appeared, from the word Katrine, meaning a well-dressed gentleman. But this time, La Katerina was not a satire. She had evolved into something gentler, wiser, and timeless, a symbol that embraced death with grace. The genius of La Katerina lies in her contradiction. She is death, yet she is elegant. A skeleton, yet adorned with flowers. A reminder of mortality, yet smiling. In her calm face, there is no horror, only acceptance. Through her, Mexicans transform the Western fear of death into something familiar, even friendly. She teaches that the grave does not erase the laughter or the dignity of life. Every year during the Dia de los Muertos celebrations, thousands of women and girls paint their faces to resemble hers. Not as a costume of fear, but as a tribute. Their eyes darkened, their lips painted into skeletal smiles, their hair woven with flowers and lace. And as they walk in the candlelit parades, they look both alive and eternal. La Katerina has become the bridge between the living and the departed, a figure who walks gracefully in both worlds. Though La Katerina is a creation of modern art, her spirit carries echoes of older goddesses. Long before her, the Aztecs worshipped Mictecacihuatl, the Lady of the Dead, a skeletal queen who ruled the underworld beside her husband Mictlantecutli. She was not cruel but just. She guarded the bones of the dead and watched over the festivals of the departed. Every autumn, offerings were made to her: flowers, obsidian, maize, and the bones of animals, so that the dead might rest peacefully. In some depictions, her face was painted with skulls and flowers, just as modern Mexicans paint their own faces today. Perhaps La Katrina is not new at all. Perhaps she is the latest mask worn by a spirit who has walked beside humanity for centuries, changing names, changing garments, but never leaving our side. There is something comforting in La Katrina's gaze. She tells us, without speaking, that beauty fades, but dignity does not. That death comes for the rich and poor alike. And so we might as well meet it with a touch of style and a smile. When people carry her image through the streets, painted on their cheeks or embroidered on their skirts, they are not flirting with darkness, but celebrating equality. For in death, as in the dust of time, every heart beats the same once more. She also reminds us to live fully, to adorn our brief years with meaning and laughter. For one day, La Katrina will invite us all to dance, not as a threat, but as a promise that the story continues. In her journey from satire to sanctity, La Katrina became more than a drawing. She became a national philosophy, an art form woven into daily life. You can find her on painted tiles, murals, earrings, bakery windows, and even children's toys. But she is never menacing. She walks through the markets of Oaxaca, smiles from the walls of cafes, and appears in modern parades where musicians play slow waltzes and dancers wear lace dresses trimmed in black and gold. Each appearance of La Katrina is a reminder that art can heal the human heart, turning fear into understanding, sorrow into beauty. If you ever walk the streets of Mexico City, San Miguel de Allende, or Morelia during the festival nights, you will see her many times. Under strings of lights and paper decorations, hundreds of people move as one slow, glowing river. Faces painted white, eyes dark and shimmering, mouths outlined like skulls. They dance not to mourn, but to honor. Some carry candles, some carry portraits, some carry baskets of flowers. And through it all, La Katrina leads the way, her silhouette tall and poised, her wide hat glowing faintly beneath the lanterns. Drums echo down the narrow streets. The sound is ancient and comforting. It is said that the dead march with them, unseen but near, following the rhythm that calls them home. Over the years, La Katrina has stepped beyond Mexico's borders. She has appeared in films, paintings, and exhibitions around the world. But wherever she goes, she carries her original message with her. That remembering the dead is not macabre, it is human. In some places, she is mistaken for a grim symbol. But to those who know her story, she remains a friend. Her calm face has taught millions to look at death differently. Not as a final silence, but as part of the endless circle that connects generations. In the quiet logic of La Katrina's world, to laugh at death is to love life more deeply. To paint a skull on one's face is to say, I am alive and I will not forget. When families place her figure on their altars, they do not worship her. They welcome her, as they would an old guest, to join them in the remembrance of those who came before. A cup of chocolate, a loaf of pan de muerto, a candle lit in the night. It is all part of a single act of love that crosses time. Some say that Posada, when carving her smile into the printing plate, felt something strange, as though the skeleton lady was watching him back. He had seen too many funerals, too many politicians pretending to be immortal. Perhaps he wanted to teach them humility. Perhaps he wanted to laugh. But perhaps, deep down, he was giving form to something older, an intuition that death was not a shadow, but a mirror. And when he carved her grin, the mirror smiled back. Now, more than a century later, La Katrina still walks the streets. She has outlived kings, revolutions, and fashions. Each year, when the marigolds bloom and the candles flicker, she rises again, not from the grave, but from the memory of a people who refuse to fear what comes after life. She walks slowly, gracefully, through the laughter and music. Her bones glimmer faintly like porcelain. Her hat sways with each step. And if you look closely, through the crowd, through the candlelight, through the veil of smoke and time, you may see her smile at you too. And so, as night deepens, let us rest with her image in mind. The serene face, the soft grin, the quiet eyes. For Katerina teaches that death is not a thief, but a teacher. That all things beautiful fade, but nothing is truly lost. The next time you see a skeleton painted with roses, remember this. It is not a symbol of fear. It is an invitation to remember, to live, and to laugh gently at the passing of time. Good night, dear listener. May your dreams tonight be filled with gentle music, soft petals, and the sound of footsteps on cobblestones. As Katerina passes by, smiling beneath her wide, feathered hat, let the world around you fade to quiet. If you listen closely, you might almost smell it. The faint, golden fragrance of marigolds drifting through the evening air. Sweet, slightly bitter, sun-warmed. It's a scent that does not belong entirely to the living. We continue our journey through Mexico's Dia de los Muertos, through petals and smoke, through light and shadow, through the tender gestures that link the living and the dead. For tonight, we will walk among the flowers and the flames, two of the oldest offerings humankind has ever made to eternity. In the language of the Nahuatl, the marigold is called cempasúchil, the flower of 20 petals. Its orange and gold blossoms resemble miniature suns, glowing even in twilight. According to legend, they were born from the tears of the goddess Xochitl after her beloved warrior Huitzilin was killed in battle. When the gods took pity on her grief, they turned her tears into flowers, and the spirit of Huitzilin returned as a hummingbird. Every time he brushed his wings against the petals, they opened again, shining with his warmth. That is why marigolds are laid for the dead, because they carry the promise of reunion. Their scent, strong and sweet, is believed to guide souls back to their families each year. Like the hummingbird, the spirits follow the trail of color and perfume to the doorways of the living. As Dia de los Muertos approaches, whole markets overflow with marigolds. Bundles of orange, yellow, and tangerine spill across wooden stalls. Farmers arrive before dawn with carts heavy with flowers, their wheels crunching softly on the cobblestones. Women in embroidered shawls thread them into garlands or scatter them in baskets. Children help, their small hands leaving trails of gold dust on their clothes. When they laugh, it seems the flowers laugh with them. Soft bursts of color in the morning haze. By evening, the petals have been carried to cemeteries, to altars, to doorsteps. People make long paths of blossoms, leading from the street to their homes, roads of gold for the souls to follow. Under candlelight, they shimmer like rivers of sunlight flowing through the night. Each object on an altar speaks a word in the silent language of remembrance. There are candles, representing the souls of the departed and the hope of light in darkness. There is water, to refresh those who have traveled far from the other world. There is salt, to purify the spirit. There is food, tamales, fruit, mole, bread, to nourish the memory of earthly pleasures. And there are flowers, always flowers, to call the spirits home. Some families add photographs, rosaries, musical instruments, or favorite items once belonging to the dead. A pair of spectacles, a small toy, a cup of coffee. These little details are tender reminders that the dead are not distant ancestors, but loved ones who once shared our laughter. To build an altar is not to mourn. It is to speak to those who cannot answer, with colors instead of words, with sense instead of sound. If the marigold is the color of the soul, then copal is its breath. This sacred resin, used since the time of the Aztecs and Maya, is burned in clay censers during the Dia de los Muertos celebrations. Its smoke curls upward in pale blue spirals, fragrant and thick, carrying prayers to the heavens and, perhaps, whispers back from the other side. In ancient temples, priests would burn copal to communicate with the gods. The rising smoke was a bridge, a thin, trembling stairway of scent between the worlds. Today, it still performs that role, though now in humble homes and churchyards rather than pyramids. When copal burns, its fragrance is unlike anything else. Sweet, earthy, almost alive. It clings to hair, to fabric, to the cool night air. It is said that the spirits recognize this scent as a signal. The way home is open. Imagine walking through a cemetery on the first night of November. The gates stand open. Candles line every path, flickering gently in the wind. Families sit together among the tombstones, their faces lit by the golden glow. They share food, stories, and laughter. Children fall asleep on their mothers' laps. Someone strums a guitar softly, and the tune floats between the graves like a lullaby. The air is filled with the perfume of marigolds and the sweet smoke of copal. You can almost feel the warmth of invisible company, the presence of those who came before. If you close your eyes, you might hear the murmur of voices just beyond your reach. Not ghosts, but memories made tender again. For the people who gather there, the boundary between the living and the dead is not something to fear. It is like a doorway left open for one night, through which love passes freely. Children grow up knowing that their grandparents will visit once more each year, and when they grow old, they will return in turn, following the same golden road. To an outsider, it may seem unusual, even mystical, that laughter and death should share the same table. But in truth, it is profoundly human. The Dia de los Muertos is not about endings. It is about continuity, about how nothing loved is ever truly gone. The flowers wither, the candles burn out, the smoke fades. Yet the memory remains, renewed each time someone lights a new flame. In every Mexican home during these days, the altar becomes the heart of the household. It glows with candles, rustles with paper decorations, and hums with quiet devotion. Around it, families gather in the evenings to pray, to sing, or simply to sit together in silence. It is not unusual for someone to speak aloud to the photograph of their mother or father. Not as a ritual, but as a conversation. They tell them of the year's harvest, of children grown taller, of new hopes and small sorrows. It is said that the dead listen kindly, though they never interrupt. Time itself feels slower during Dia de los Muertos. The pace of the world seems to match the rhythm of the candles, steady, unhurried, patient. Even in the busiest cities, something stills. People who rarely visit cemeteries during the year come now with baskets and songs. Old rivalries are forgotten. Neighbors greet one another quietly among the graves. The living remember that they too will one day be remembered. This acceptance brings peace, the kind that cannot be taught by books or sermons, but only by ritual and repetition. When dawn comes, the marigolds begin to droop slightly, their scent deepening, The petals fall one by one, forming a soft carpet of orange. Children often collect them and toss them into the air, giggling as the golden confetti rains down. It is as though the sun itself is shedding its light in tiny pieces. Those petals will soon return to the soil, becoming nourishment for next year's blooms. In that endless cycle, the people see a reflection of the human spirit, born, faded, returned, reborn again. Every flower is a little promise that nothing truly ends. If you ever visit Mexico in late October, you will notice it yourself. Even before the parades and the music, before the altars are fully built, there is a change in the air. The scent of copal drifts from open doors. Marigold petals appear on thresholds, waiting like breadcrumbs for the souls to follow. And in the faces of those preparing the altars, you will see not sadness, but serenity. It is a peace that comes from knowing that death is not absence, but transformation. As the copal smoke rises and disappears into the blue, one understands. It does not vanish. It becomes part of the sky. By the second morning of November, the spirits begin to depart. The families thank them for their visit. The last candles are allowed to burn down on their own, and the air grows still. The petals are swept gently away, the altars taken down piece by piece. But the fragrance remains, a trace of sweetness in the corners of the room, a reminder of invisible company. For some, that scent lingers for days, clinging to curtains and hair. They say it's the soul's way of saying farewell, promising to return when the marigolds bloom again. The night is still young, and our story deepens like candlelight pooling into gold. We have followed the marigolds through the streets and watched their petals guide the spirits home. We have breathed in the sacred smoke of copal and felt its gentle pull between the worlds. Now we stand before something radiant, the heart of the celebration, the quiet masterpiece of every home, every family, the altar, or, as it is known in Spanish, el altar de muertos. Tonight, we will not rush through its symbols. We will stand before it as one might stand before a painting, in reverence, in silence, in curiosity, and learn what each layer, each flicker, each small detail means to those who build it year after year. An altar is more than a structure. It is a conversation between the living and the dead, built with patience, color, and devotion. It rises gradually, like a memory retold in layers. At first glance, you might see only candles and flowers, but each part of the altar holds meaning, a language older than words. Some altars are simple, a single table draped in white cloth, with a photograph, a candle, and a small plate of food. Others rise like miniature temples, tier upon tier, filled with offerings and symbols. In humble homes and grand churches alike, they glow with the same tenderness. For the altar is not about wealth, but about love. Traditionally, an altar has 2, 3, or even 7 levels. Each represents a stage in the journey of the soul. The 2-level altar is the simplest. The upper level represents the heavens, the divine. The lower represents the earth, the human realm. Together, they form a bridge, allowing souls to pass from one world to the other. A 3-level altar adds depth to that symbolism: the sky, the earth, and the underworld. It reflects the ancient Mesoamerican belief in the cyclical nature of existence, that we rise, fall, and rise again, endlessly renewed. The 7-level altar, often used in rural areas, mirrors the 7 trials souls must pass to reach peace. Each tier carries a different element: earth, wind, water, fire, the offering, the soul's rest, and the divine ascent. but even those who do not remember the exact meanings still build them by instinct. For somewhere deep within, humanity knows how to speak to its dead. At the base of the altar lies a cloth, often white, symbolizing purity. In some regions, it is embroidered with flowers, saints, or geometric designs. Sometimes, a simple cross of salt or petals is placed on top, a fusion of pre-Hispanic symbolism and Christian faith. The cross, though European in origin, was easily embraced by indigenous peoples who already saw the four directions, north, south, east, and west, as sacred. Thus, the Christian symbol and the cosmic map became one. In that merging, we see again how the Day of the Dead is not one culture replacing another, but two worlds intertwining like vines. Candles are the most essential element of all. They are the eyes of the altar, glowing with quiet life. Each one represents a soul remembered, a light guiding them home. Their number varies, 4 for the cardinal directions, or many more for all departed family members. The flames dance softly, their smoke rising like whispered prayers. In some homes, candles are arranged in the shape of a cross. In others, they form a circle, the symbol of eternity. And in the silence between their flickers, the living feel the warmth of presence, as if each tiny flame were the breath of a soul returned. On every altar stands a glass of clear water. It might seem simple, but it carries profound meaning. The water quenches the thirst of spirits who have traveled far through the dry lands of the beyond. It also symbolizes purity, renewal, and life itself. Just as it nourishes the living, it comforts the dead, a reminder that the bond between worlds is as natural as the flow of rivers returning to the sea. In some places, drops of water are sprinkled across the altar to cleanse the path for the returning souls. Each droplet catches the candlelight like a star, turning the altar into a sky of its own. No altar is complete without food. It is the most human of all offerings because it carries warmth, memory, and love. Every dish tells a story. There is pan de muerto, bread of the dead, soft and round, sprinkled with sugar, decorated with shapes of bones. There are tamales wrapped in banana leaves, fruits like guavas and oranges, and in some regions, bowls of mole, that deep, rich sauce of cacao, chili, and spices. Families cook the favorite meals of their departed loved ones. If a grandfather loved coffee, there's a steaming cup placed for him. If a child once adored sweets, there will be a small pile of candies. It is said that the spirits do not consume the food physically, but take its essence, its aroma, its memory, leaving behind the flavorless shell for the living to share later. Thus, both worlds feast together, each in their own way. Near the center of the altar stands the photograph, the face of the one being remembered. Sometimes the photo is framed in lace or flowers, sometimes just propped up gently against a candle. Next to it are small objects, a pair of spectacles, a book, a rosary, a toy, a hat, a pipe. To the unknowing eye, they may seem trivial, but to the family, they are sacred relics of daily life. In remembering these details, people keep the dead alive, not as spirits in abstraction, but as the same warm, imperfect, beloved humans they once were. The altar becomes a home within a home, a miniature world where nothing is lost. Above the altar, delicate paper banners flutter in the air, papel picado. Each sheet is cut into intricate designs, skulls, angels, flowers, suns. They are fragile, trembling, and luminous. The breath of wind, giving color and shape. In ancient belief, wind is the element of communication, the whisper that carries messages between the living and the dead. Thus, these banners are not just decoration. They are invitations, doors for the invisible to enter. When the evening breeze moves through them, it is said to be the souls themselves brushing past, playing in the paper as they once played in the fields of life. The altar is a perfect example of what Mexico is, a meeting of indigenous reverence and Christian devotion. On its surface, the Virgin of Guadalupe may share space with statues of Aztec gods, and no contradiction is felt. Faith here is inclusive, like a mosaic of centuries. Each generation adds its own color. To outsiders, it may seem complex. To those who live it, it is as natural as breathing. In every candle and petal, they see not theology, but gratitude. Not dogma, but love. For families, building the altar is a ritual of reunion. It takes hours, sometimes days. Each step is done with care, almost like preparing for a guest who is dearly missed. Grandmothers tell stories as they arrange the flowers. Children run errands, fetching sugar skulls from the market. Fathers hammer wooden frames together while mothers lay out photographs. Laughter and memories flow together. Sometimes there are tears, but even they are gentle, for this work is not sadness, but love made visible. When everything is ready, the first candle is lit. The moment is quiet, sacred. The flame trembles as if awakening. And just like that, the altar becomes alive. Each additional candle adds its own voice to the chorus of light. Shadows dance along the walls, the scent of copal rises, and the marigold petals glow like embers. It is as though the room itself begins to breathe. When the altar is finished, families keep vigil beside it. Some pray, others sing softly. Some simply sit and watch the flames. They say that the spirits come silently, drawn by the warmth, by the scent, by the love. If you listen closely, you might hear the faintest echo. The sound of laughter remembered, the rustle of a familiar step. It is said that on this night, no one is truly alone. By dawn, the candles have shortened. The petals have begun to curl, but the air is still heavy with incense and peace. The family eats together, sharing the food from the altar, believing that the dead have already tasted its essence. In that simple meal, life and death sit at the same table. When they finish, they thank the spirits for visiting and promise to meet again next year. The altar will be taken down, but the memory, like wax on wood, leaves its mark. The candles are glowing softly, and the night has deepened into that gentle hour when sound becomes liquid and slow. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear distant music. The strum of a guitar, the light tapping of drums, the echo of laughter carried on the breeze. Tonight, we travel to the lighter side of the Day of the Dead, to the laughter that lives among bones, the joy hidden in sugar skulls, and the songs that make even the shadows smile. For in Mexico, death is not merely a silence. It is a story, a smile, a poem written with humor and tenderness. Proof that to laugh in the face of death is not to mock it, but to make peace with its eternal company. In plazas and streets across the country, paper and clay skeletons appear everywhere. Some seated at tables, others playing guitars or riding bicycles. They are called calacas, and they are not meant to frighten. They are reminders that death is a part of life's great carnival. The calica smiles always. Sometimes she dances. Sometimes he plays the trumpet. Children giggle as they see them in the markets, limbs wobbling cheerfully. Even adults smile because these bony figures carry a truth. Beneath our clothes, beneath our pride, we are all the same shape. And that sameness, rather than being tragic, is deeply comforting. To the Mexican imagination, death is not a dark, cloaked stranger. It is a neighbor who sometimes joins the party, drinks a little mezcal, and reminds you to dance while you still can. From ancient times, laughter has been a charm against fear. The Aztecs had gods who played jokes, spirits who mocked kings, and rituals in which death itself was invited to feast, as if to say, "We know you are there, but you will not ruin the night." When Spanish priests arrived and spoke of hell and sin, the people of Mexico smiled and listened. But they did not forget their older wisdom. They understood that laughter does not insult death, it tames it. And so, in each Dia de los Muertos, you will find humor woven through the remembrance. Poems that tease death, songs that wink at it, cakes shaped like skulls, smiling as if to say, "We are ready." Perhaps the most famous image of the celebration is the Calavera de Azúcar, the sugar skull. It shines with bright icing, tiny colored foil, and even the names of the living written across the forehead in sugar script. To outsiders, this may seem strange. Why would someone eat a skull with their own name on it? But for Mexicans, it is a gesture of joyful acceptance, a reminder that life is fleeting and sweet, and that our names too will someday belong to memory. The tradition began centuries ago, when sugar became inexpensive enough for artisans to mold into figures. They pressed it into clay molds shaped like skulls and decorated them with vivid colors, red for blood, blue for the sky, yellow for the marigolds, and green for life. Children received them as gifts. Friends exchanged them with laughter. And when one finally bites into the sugar, the sweetness dissolves like time itself. A soft, fading pleasure, much like life's own flavor. Another tradition, as beloved as the sugar skull, is the Calavera Literaria. The literary skull, a poem written in jest to personify death. These short verses often describe death, la muerte, visiting people in daily life. Perhaps she comes to take a politician away while he's giving a speech. Or she sneaks into a marketplace, or knocks politely on the door of a poet who still has unfinished lines. The poems are humorous, but they always carry a wink of wisdom. That death is patient, impartial, and strangely courteous. In newspapers and classrooms across Mexico, people write their own calaveras literarias each year. It is an exercise not in morbidity, but in creativity, a cultural dance between humor and humility. During the festivals, the living themselves become skeletons. Faces are painted white, eyes darkened with black circles, and mouths traced with delicate bone-like lines. But each face is unique, some adorned with roses and jewels, some painted in gold or silver, some bearing tears, others smiles. In this gentle masquerade, people celebrate their mortality openly. They walk hand in hand through the night, each a living reminder that life's beauty lies in its impermanence. When a mother paints her daughter's face like La Katerina, she is not teaching fear. She is teaching courage, the courage to see death and still smile. In towns large and small, processions fill the streets during the nights of the festival. Gigantic papier-mâché skeletons, sometimes taller than a house, sway and dance above the crowd. Bands play slow waltzes mixed with folk rhythms, and people follow with candles in hand. The mood is neither carnival nor funeral. It is something in between, a calm jubilation, a gentle celebration that honors the balance between joy and sorrow. Each drumbeat seems to echo the heartbeat of the earth itself. Each sway of the puppet skeleton reminds us that even when the body is gone, the dance continues. Children are not excluded from these customs. They are their keepers. In schools, they make miniature altars from cardboard, draw colorful skulls on paper, and learn small songs about the souls of the departed. They laugh as they exchange candy skulls, sometimes pretending to be ghosts, sometimes whispering to the photographs on the classroom altar. Come visit us tonight. For them, death is not terrifying. It is playful, a story told with bright paper and soft light. The elders smile when they see it, for it means the tradition will live on. In some regions, entire plays are performed in honor of the dead. Actors dressed as skeletons tell stories of foolish kings, lost lovers, and the trickster Death who steals apples or dances in taverns. These performances are full of laughter and moral lessons. They remind people that death spares no one. Not the rich, not the powerful, not the proud. But they also remind us that death is not cruel. It is the equalizer, the final joke told by life itself. When the audience laughs at death on stage, they are really laughing with her, acknowledging her as an old friend who will someday invite them to dance the same steps. What makes this cultural approach to death so unique is its gentleness. It transforms fear into beauty and grief into art. In most of the world, death is hidden, whispered about, feared, covered in black cloth. But in Mexico, she walks in daylight, dressed in lace and flowers, smiling without menace. This openness is a kind of wisdom. By bringing death to the table, people learn to savor life more fully. By laughing at the inevitable, they disarm its sting. If you wander through a market during Dia de los Muertos, you will see rows upon rows of sugar skulls, paper skeletons, clay figurines, candles, and incense. Vendors call out softly, their voices mingling with the hum of the crowd and the rustle of flowers. There are loaves of pan de muerto, decorated with bone-shaped dough, stacked beside bottles of hot chocolate and baskets of fruit. The air is thick with the smell of anise and cinnamon. Every item for sale seems to carry the same message. Remember love and smile. Even the smallest object, a painted skull no bigger than your thumb, is a piece of philosophy made tangible. As night falls, the laughter softens into music. Guitars, violins, and flutes blend with the murmuring of the crowd. Songs of remembrance are sung slowly, like lullabies. One might expect sorrow, but the songs are tender instead. Melodies that speak of reunion, of eternal love, of the belief that absence is only temporary. If you stand among them, you will feel something remarkable. A quiet unity, as if every voice, living and dead, is part of the same chorus. Let us travel back now, far before the parades, before sugar skulls, before the cross and the rosary, to a time when the world was young and the gods still walked among the people. To understand the Day of the Dead as it lives today, we must listen to the whispers of its ancient roots. For beneath the laughter and the candles lies something older, something born in temples of stone and in hearts that beat to the rhythm of the sun. Long before the Spanish ships appeared on the horizon, the Valley of Mexico was home to powerful civilizations. The Mexica, whom we call Aztecs, and their neighbors, the Mixtec, Zapotec, and Maya. They looked at the world not as a straight line from birth to death, but as a circle, eternal, repeating, and balanced. Life and death were not opposites. They were companions, each necessary for the other to exist. The Aztecs called themselves the people of the sun, for they believed their duty was to keep the sun alive through ritual and sacrifice. Every dawn was a victory over darkness, and every sunset a reminder that death too had its turn. Their gods lived, died, and were reborn, and so too did humanity. In that world stood a queen, serene and powerful, Mictlantecuhtli, the Lady of the Dead. She ruled alongside her husband, Mictlantecuhtli, over the underworld known as Mictlan. Unlike the Christian concept of hell, Mictlan was not a place of punishment. It was the realm of rest, where the souls of ordinary people journeyed after death. The path to reach it was long and perilous, a descent through 9 levels of challenges. Souls would pass through mountains that collided together, cross rivers guarded by serpents, and endure winds that cut like obsidian blades. But these trials were not cruel. They were purifying, a sacred journey by which the soul shed its earthly burdens before joining the ancestors. At the end of the path, Mictlantecuhtli waited, a skeletal goddess adorned with jewels and flowers, her eyes vast and calm as night itself. She welcomed each soul not as a judge, but as a mother receiving her children. Every year the Aztecs held great feasts in her honor. They brought offerings of fruit, maize and jade, burned copal, and placed food for the dead on woven mats. These festivals were not hidden in fear, but celebrated under open sky. People danced, sang, and offered flowers to both the living and the departed. It was believed that during these days, the barrier between worlds weakened, and that the dead returned to share in the feast. Sound familiar, dear listener? Indeed, this ancient tradition would survive even after conquest and conversion, folded gently into new names, but never forgotten. The Aztecs believed that not all souls went to Mictlan. Their destiny depended not on morality, but on the manner of their death. Those who died in battle or childbirth, considered the same heroic act, joined the sun god Tonatiuh, rising each morning in his blazing company. Those who drowned or were struck by lightning went to Tlalocan, the paradise of the rain god Tlaloc, a lush, verdant realm of eternal spring. Infants, too pure to face the trials of Mictlan, went to Chichihuacuco, where a celestial tree nourished them with milk until they were ready to return to life again. In this vision of the cosmos, death was many things, a journey, a rest, a transformation, but never annihilation. Skulls were sacred long before La Katerina ever donned her hat. In the great city of Tenochtitlan, the Tzompantli, or skull rack, displayed real skulls as offerings to the gods. To modern eyes, it may seem morbid, but to the Aztecs, it was a celebration of continuity, a physical proof that life and death fed each other in an unending cycle. The skulls symbolized regeneration. It was the seed beneath the soil, the husk of the corn that must die so the plant might live. In every harvest, the people saw the same rhythm, death nourishing new life. And so, skulls appeared in art, jewelry, and sculpture, bright, proud, and serene. When, centuries later, the sugar skull appeared, it carried that same quiet philosophy, that the face of death is not horror, but the mirror of renewal. The Aztec year was woven from 2 calendars, one solar, one ritual. Together, they guided the festivals and seasons. Among the many feasts, 2 stood out, one to honor dead children and another for dead adults. They fell roughly in what we now call late July and early August, months of harvest and ripening. When the Spanish arrived, they shifted these observances to coincide with All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day in early November. But though the date changed, the spirit of the celebration did not. The Aztec heart continued to beat beneath the new names, just as an ancient melody still lingers beneath modern song. During the old festivals, families would prepare altars called ofrendas for their ancestors. They placed maize, beans, chili, and honey on them. Gifts meant to comfort the souls during their visit. Little figures made of amaranth dough, sometimes shaped as gods or animals, were offered and later eaten, joining the living and dead through shared nourishment. The air was filled with music and fragrance. Dancers in feathered costumes moved in slow circles, their steps mimicking the rotation of the heavens. To them, to honor the dead was to feed the universe itself. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they found these ceremonies everywhere. Vibrant, joyful, and deeply spiritual. To the friars who accompanied them, these rituals seemed pagan, even threatening. They tried to replace them with Christian commemorations of the dead. But the people did not forget. They adapted. They moved their offerings to churchyards instead of temple courtyards. They placed Christian crosses beside images of Mictacatzihuatl. And so, layer by layer, the two worlds merged. The Virgin Mary took on aspects of the old fertility goddesses. The rosary replaced the prayer beads made of seeds. And the ofrenda, once an altar to the old gods, became the altar we see today, glowing with marigolds and candles. It was not erasure, it was transformation. The spirit of the ancestors remained, only dressed in new clothing. Even in the modern celebration, you can still see traces of that ancient sun worship. The marigold, with its fiery hue, represents the eternal sun guiding the dead. The candles mirror the old belief that fire leads the way through darkness. And the circular bread, pan de muerto, echoes the circle of the cosmos, a bread of stars and endings and beginnings. Every year, when families build their altars and light their candles, they unconsciously reenact the oldest human act, to invite the sun to rise again and to call the dead home through its warmth. The strength of the Day of the Dead lies not only in its survival, but in its adaptability. It has absorbed change for centuries without losing its soul. In it, you can hear the voices of many civilizations: the Aztec who burned copal at the foot of pyramids, the Spanish friar chanting his prayers, the grandmother whispering a blessing over her altar. All speak the same truth in different tongues: that death is not the opposite of life, but its partner. The River of Souls. In the mythology of the Aztecs, souls reached Mictlan by crossing a great river with the help of a dog, usually a Xoloitzcuintli, the hairless dog still beloved in Mexico today. Families sometimes buried their dead with a small ceramic dog to guide them safely through the waters of the underworld. Even now, many people keep this ancient breed as a pet, calling it the guardian of souls. It is said that when it howls in the night, it is not crying at the moon, but speaking to those who journey beyond. In the year 1519, the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés set foot on the coast of Veracruz. Behind him came soldiers, horses, cannons, and priests. Ahead of him lay the mighty empire of the Mexica, whose capital, Tenochtitlan, shimmered on the waters of its lake like a dream made real. When the Spaniards first witnessed the temples of the Aztecs, their pyramids, their offerings, their festivals of the dead, they were awed and terrified in equal measure. To their eyes, these ceremonies were not acts of devotion, but of blasphemy. To the priests who came with the soldiers, the people of Mexico were souls to be saved. Their gods were false, their rituals dangerous. They saw the marigolds, the skulls, the dances, and the offerings, and mistook reverence for idolatry. But the people who had lived here for millennia understood something the newcomers did not: that death, like the earth itself, cannot be conquered. Tenochtitlan fell in 1521. After months of siege, its temples burned its waters red with battle. The sound of drums and prayers gave way to the tolling of church bells. In the ruins, the friars began their work, baptizing, teaching, building churches on top of the ancient temples. They sought to erase the old gods, but the old gods had already learned the language of survival. They hid in new names, in the folds of saints and angels, in the rituals of the new faith. And as the years turned to decades, the people began to weave their old beliefs into the cloth of Christianity. Not through rebellion, but through quiet, persistent remembering. The Spaniards brought with them the Catholic feast of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, a time to pray for the departed, to light candles, to visit cemeteries. It fell on the 1st and 2nd days of November, and in that coincidence, the people saw a door. Their own festivals for the dead had been held earlier in the year, but they moved them, folding the old customs into the new calendar. The ancient offerings to Mictacatzihuatl and the ancestors became the ofrenda to Christian souls in purgatory. The marigold, once sacred to the sun, was now blessed in the name of the Virgin. And the prayers once sung in Nahuatl to the gods of the underworld were whispered in Spanish, addressed to the saints. What emerged was neither purely indigenous nor purely European, but something entirely new. A spiritual fusion unlike any other in the world. To the friars, the altars built in homes were signs of Christian devotion. But to the families, they remained bridges to the ancestors. Each candle lit for a departed soul still carried the flame of the old world. The people learned to speak in two theologies at once. The Virgin Mary, robed in stars, became an echo of the goddess Tonantzin, the Mother of Earth. And when the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared on the hill of Tepeyac in 1531, many saw not a new miracle, but the return of the ancient mother, wearing a Christian face so she could stay among her children. In her, the old and the new worlds finally shook hands. As the church forbade pagan temple ceremonies, families began to bring their offerings to churchyards instead. The cemeteries became sacred gardens, filled with candles, flowers, and music. The priests approved the lighting of candles, the saying of prayers, and even the baking of pan de muerto, seeing in these acts the reflection of European traditions. They did not realize that behind each gesture still beat the pulse of the Aztec cosmos. The people had simply changed the names, but not the meaning. And so, beneath the shadow of church towers, the spirit of Mictlan lived on, peacefully sharing space with heaven and purgatory. For the indigenous people, the Catholic saints became a new pantheon. Each saint was linked quietly to an older god or goddess. Saint Michael the Archangel, the warrior of heaven, was equated with Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war. Saint Anthony, gentle and kind, took on the role of protector of animals, once held by the god Siptotec. Saint James, the thunder-bearing apostle, inherited the lightning of Tlaloc. The people prayed to the saints in Spanish during the day and whispered to the ancestors in Nahuatl by night. And in that quiet balance, the two religions ceased to fight. They began to blend as the river blends with the sea. The Christian altar, with its candles, cross, and holy images, was familiar to the priests. But the Mexican people added their own elements: flowers, food, and the faces of their dead. They believed that on these sacred days, the souls of loved ones returned to visit, not as ghosts, but as welcomed guests. And so, they built for them altars filled with light, just as their ancestors had done before the conquest. The difference now was not in the act, but in the names whispered above the flames. Over time, the Spanish clergy realized that the people would not abandon their ancient customs. So they did something remarkable. They allowed them to continue as long as they wore the garments of Christianity. Thus, the Dia de los Muertos became both Catholic and indigenous, a holy paradox, where rosaries were said beside skulls and prayers for salvation were mingled with offerings of corn and cocoa. In the colonial towns, processions of saints walked beside parades of paper skeletons. The church bells rang over the same cemeteries where musicians played flutes and drums. And though the friars may not have known it, they had helped give birth to a faith unlike any other, one that could speak to both heaven and earth at once. Even under Spanish rule, the people of Mexico continued to count time their own way. The agricultural calendar, the phases of the moon, and the rhythm of planting and harvest still shaped their rituals. They saw in the cycle of the crops the same pattern as in life and death: growth, decay, renewal. Thus, the Christian idea of resurrection fused effortlessly with the Aztec understanding of rebirth. Both spoke of continuity, of the seed returning to the soil. When a priest spoke of eternal life, the farmers nodded knowingly. They had always believed in it. As Christianity spread, art became the bridge between the two worlds. In colonial churches, painters and sculptors, often indigenous, began to fill the walls with images of saints and angels that bore faint traces of pre-Hispanic style. The Virgin's robe glowed in the colors of maize. Her crown resembled a solar disk. The angels looked more like the old gods of rain and harvest than European cherubs. Through brush and pigment, the people hid their memories in plain sight. The old world lived behind the new one, like a mural painted over another mural, never erased, only waiting to be seen. In time, the church itself embraced song and celebration. Masses were sung with native instruments, flutes, drums, and shells, their melodies rising into vaulted cathedrals like echoes from ancient pyramids. The prayers for the dead were translated into indigenous languages, so that each community could speak to heaven in its own voice. In those hymns, the two worlds finally began to harmonize. The chants of the priests and the rhythms of the people merged into a single song, a song that still lives on every Dia de los Muertos night. By the 17th century, the fusion was complete. The old gods no longer needed temples. They lived now in the flowers, in the bread, in the laughter of families gathered by candlelight. The Day of the Dead had become both a Christian commemoration and an indigenous homecoming. It belonged to neither Spain nor Mexico alone, but to humanity's shared desire to remember those who have gone, and to believe that they somehow still remember us. Perhaps the greatest miracle of this blending is not the survival of old customs, but the tenderness with which they adapted. The people of Mexico took the pain of conquest and turned it into art. They transformed loss into celebration, fear into reverence. In this hybrid faith, there is room for both the cross and the sun, for both the saint and the ancestor, for both prayer and laughter. And when each November the candles are lit, it is not a single tradition that burns, but two, intertwined, glowing together in perfect balance. After the Spanish conquest, when the two faiths began to blend, the Day of the Dead took root most deeply in the rural heart of Mexico. In small mountain villages, where Catholic priests came only a few times a year, the people preserved their customs with quiet devotion. Homes were built of adobe, their roofs thatched with straw. In every house, there stood a small altar, a cross, a candle, a handful of flowers, and perhaps a photograph in a wooden frame. When the days of remembrance arrived, the villagers went to the cemeteries at dusk, carrying baskets of marigolds, bread, and sometimes a bottle of pulque or mezcal for their ancestors. There, they lit candles, sat by the graves, and sang until dawn. To them, this was not an act of religion or rebellion. It was simply life, the rhythm by which the year turned. In these early centuries, every region of Mexico shaped the Day of the Dead in its own image. In Oaxaca, altars were adorned with woven rugs, carved gourds, and bright local pottery. In Michoacán, the Purepecha people built their famous nighttime vigils on the island of Janitzio, where boats carrying candles move across the dark lake like constellations reborn on water. In Yucatan, the Maya celebrated Hanal Pixan, the food for the souls. They cooked tamales filled with pork, served chocolate spiced with cinnamon, and set the tables for guests, both visible and unseen. In every corner of the land, the same idea bloomed, that love does not die. It simply changes form. Empires rose and fell. Spain lost its colonies, and Mexico, through revolution and struggle, found its own identity again. But through every upheaval, the Day of the Dead endured, not as a relic, but as the pulse of the people. Farmers who lost their fields still built their altars. Families who fled to cities carried the tradition in their hearts. Even during wars, when gunfire echoed through the valleys, candles still burned on graves. It was said that death itself paused its march on those nights, listening to the prayers of those who remembered. By the 19th century, Mexico City had become a vast, bustling capital, a place of carriages, newspapers, and new ideas. Factories rose beside churches, and electric lights began to replace candles. Yet even here, amid progress and noise, the spirit of the old festival adapted rather than disappeared. Markets filled with sugar skulls and paper skeletons. Newspapers printed satirical poems about death. Street artists, like José Guadalupe Posada, gave the people a new symbol, La Calavera Katerina, elegant, witty, and unafraid. She became the city's own version of the ancient goddess, a lady of both life and death, modern yet eternal. In her smile, the old laughter of the countryside found a new echo. The early 20th century was a turbulent time. Mexico was changing, fighting for land, for justice, for its own voice. But even revolutions paused for the Day of the Dead. Soldiers lit candles beside their fallen comrades. Families placed photographs of lost sons on their makeshift altars. And in towns scarred by conflict, music returned, as if to remind the living that the dead were still near, still listening. Artists and writers began to see the festival not only as a custom, but as a national treasure, a proof that Mexico had something unique and enduring, a way of facing mortality with grace and humor. When Diego Rivera painted La Katrina into his mural dream of a Sunday afternoon in the Alameda Central, he was not merely illustrating a legend. He was painting a philosophy. There she stood, the skeleton in a wide hat, surrounded by figures from Mexico's history, Aztec, colonial, revolutionary. A single image uniting centuries. Rivera's Katrina walked between the living and the dead, between the old gods and the new city, between art and memory. Through his brush, she became the eternal symbol of the Mexican soul. Elegant, humorous, unbreakable. After the revolution ended in the 1920s, Mexico began to rediscover its indigenous roots. Schools taught the songs and crafts of the countryside. Writers celebrated the beauty of local traditions. And the Day of the Dead became not just a folk custom, but a symbol of national identity. In the cities, people began building public altars. Museums held exhibitions of skulls and flowers. Children learned to write calaveras literarias in classrooms. The government, once wary of pagan customs, embraced them as part of what it meant to be Mexican. The festival, once private and humble, became a shared ritual of memory, a moment when an entire nation paused to speak to its ancestors. As decades passed, millions of Mexicans left their villages for work in cities or abroad. They carried the Day of the Dead with them like a sacred heirloom. In the barrios of Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Madrid, altars began to appear once more. Built from cardboard boxes, decorated with photos printed on home computers, lit with small electric candles. Even far from home, the marigold's color remained the same. Even in new languages, the prayers still carried the same love. The dead, it seemed, could find their way anywhere. In modern Mexico, the Day of the Dead has grown vast and vibrant. Cities hold parades where thousands of people, their faces painted like skulls, walk through streets filled with music, flowers, and floating lanterns. Television screens show the celebrations in Pátzcuaro, Oaxaca, and Mixquiche. Museums display intricate altars dedicated to poets, artists, and musicians. Even the smallest shop might set a corner table with a candle and a photograph of someone who once worked there. It is not spectacle. It is continuity. Each new generation adds its own layer to the tradition, like another petal on the endless marigold of memory. In recent years, the world beyond Mexico has discovered the Day of the Dead. Films, exhibitions, and festivals have carried its imagery to every continent. Children in distant lands now paint their faces like Katerina and learn her story. Artists in Europe and Asia create their own altars, inspired by the Mexican example. And while some worry that this spreads too thin, many Mexicans see it differently, as the souls of their ancestors traveling farther than ever before, teaching the world that remembrance can be joyful. The Day of the Dead, once local, has become a global poem about love, loss, and return. Despite modernization, the essence of the celebration has not changed. In every neighborhood of Mexico City, from the old colonial districts to the glass towers of the new, you can still find candles burning in windows, paper banners swaying in the evening air, and the faint scent of copal drifting between the buildings. At midnight, the city hums like a living altar. Cars slow down near cemeteries. People stop at street shrines. Somewhere, someone whispers a name and places a flower by a photograph. The metropolis becomes a single heart, beating softly for those who have gone before. The Day of the Dead is no longer only about the past. It has become a dialogue with the future, a way for young people to ask, what will remain of us when we are gone? Through art, through technology, through memory, they continue to build new bridges with the same timeless purpose, to keep love alive. Some altars now include digital screens with family videos, music playlists, and messages written by grandchildren to grandparents they never met. The form evolves, but the feeling remains sacred. As long as someone lights a candle, the conversation never ends. The world outside feels hushed, as though the stars themselves are listening. In that silence, let us journey south, where two of Mexico's most beautiful and spiritual celebrations unfold. In the lake islands of Michoacan and the mountain valleys of Oaxaca. These are places where time slows down, where tradition breathes as softly as the smoke of a candle, and where every November, Entire communities open their doors to welcome both the living and the dead. As dusk falls over Michoacan, a cool mist begins to rise from Lake Pátzcuaro. The water ripples faintly, and in the distance, tiny lights begin to appear. First a few, then hundreds, until the entire lake seems covered in floating stars. This is Janitzio, a small island that, for one night each year, becomes a world between worlds. Fishermen steer their wooden boats slowly, each carrying a single candle or lantern. Their nets, shaped like butterfly wings, catch not fish tonight, but moonlight. The air smells of copal and damp reeds. From the hilltop rises the soft chant of prayers and the faint ringing of bells from the village church. Every family climbs the narrow paths to the cemetery, their arms full of marigolds, bread, and photographs wrapped carefully in cloth. By nightfall, the graveyard blazes with light. Hundreds of candles surround each tomb, their flames trembling in the lake breeze. Women kneel to arrange petals. Men pour small cups of mezcal. Children fall asleep in their mothers' shawls. No one weeps loudly here. Instead, they speak softly, as if afraid to disturb the souls who have returned. It is said that on this night, the spirits rise from the waters and climb the hill of Janitzio, drawn by the scent of flowers and food. The people keep vigil until dawn. They sing slow songs in Purépecha, the language of their ancestors. The melody carries across the lake, and for those listening from the shore, it sounds like the murmur of the dead themselves. If you were to walk among the graves, you would see entire families gathered around a single cross, their faces lit by candlelight, their eyes reflecting the flames like tiny suns. They speak to their loved ones as though they are sitting right there beside them. And perhaps they are. In Janitzio, belief is not questioned. It is lived. At midnight, the wind shifts. For a moment, every flame leans the same way, and an old woman whispers, "Elos Yeligarin." They have arrived. The vigil continues until the first light of dawn. When the sun finally breaks over the horizon, the lake gleams gold, and the people smile. The souls have come, and they will return again next year. For the Purépecha people, death is not a separation, but a renewal. The Day of the Dead, or Noche de Muertos, is not merely a ceremony. It is a sacred responsibility passed from one generation to the next. Every child learns the path to the cemetery, the songs, the prayers, and the names of those who came before. In this way, time does not move forward, but in circles, each November bringing the same reunion, each candle relit from the flame of the one before it. Now, dear listener, let us leave the lake behind and journey southward, through valleys carved by rivers and framed by mountains, to the land of Oaxaca. Here, the Day of the Dead is not a quiet vigil alone. It is a festival that lasts for days, a mingling of solemn devotion and radiant joy. Oaxaca's streets come alive with sound and color. Brass bands march through the old colonial plazas, their trumpets echoing between stone walls. Women in embroidered dresses carry baskets of marigolds on their heads, their skirts swirling like waves of color. Children run past, their faces painted as laughing skulls, holding tiny candles that glow like fireflies. And yet, beneath the noise and brightness, there is a softness, an awareness that every song, every laugh, is an offering to those unseen. In every home, altars bloom like miniature gardens of memory. Photographs of grandparents, candles, fruits, and glasses of mezcal or chocolate fill tables draped with lace. Bread of the dead, woven into shapes of bones and hearts, rests beside sugar skulls with names written in icing. The air is heavy with the perfume of marigolds and the faint sweetness of copal. Each item has meaning, each flame a purpose. The altar is both an act of art and of faith, the soul of the home made visible. In the courtyards of Oaxaca, artists kneel to create tapetes de arena, tapestries of colored sand. With careful fingers, they form images of saints, skeletons, and flowers, each grain placed with quiet precision. The colors, crimson, gold, jade, and violet, shine under candlelight, their beauty destined to vanish by morning. When the wind scatters them, no one mourns. They were never meant to last, only to be seen, to exist for one night in honor of those who once lived. It is art as prayer, ephemeral and eternal all at once. Throughout the city, comparsas, festive processions, fill the narrow streets. Musicians play trumpets and drums, giant puppets dance, and people dressed as skeletons move in gentle rhythm, their laughter mingling with the scent of incense. At first glance, it seems like a parade of joy. But look closer, and you will see something deeper. The living walking side by side with their memories. Each person carries a story in their heart, a lost friend, a departed child, a beloved grandparent. The music is not noise, it is communication, a way of saying, "We remember you." In the harmony of brass and drums, the line between worlds fades like mist. When night falls, the celebration moves to the cemeteries. Families gather once again by the graves, as they have done for generations. Candles are placed in circles, flowers laid in patterns that resemble suns and stars. From a distance, the entire valley seems to glow. You can hear music still, soft guitars, sometimes a quiet accordion, sometimes voices humming lullabies. Some families stay until dawn, others drift home before midnight, but none leave without whispering a farewell. Nos vemos pronto. We'll see each other soon. In the days before the festival, Oaxaca's markets overflow with life. Stalls are piled high with marigolds, candles, and loaves of pan de muerto. Vendors sell wooden toys, tiny skeletons riding bicycles, and clay figurines of dogs meant to guide souls through the afterlife. Everywhere you look, you see color. Red peppers, yellow corn, purple flowers. The fragrance of chocolate mingles with the scent of incense. It feels as if the city itself is preparing an altar. Each street another offering, each person another candle. In both Janitzio and Oaxaca, you will find something rare. Children and elders celebrating together, side by side. A grandmother teaches her grandson how to arrange marigold petals in a spiral. A father lifts his daughter to place a candle on a gravestone. A teenage boy plays the same song his great-grandfather once sang. In these moments, the line between generations blurs, and life, death, and remembrance become one. This is perhaps the most sacred truth of the Day of the Dead, that love, once born, does not end. When dawn breaks, the cemeteries are quiet again. Wax pools where candles once burned, and petals lie scattered in the grass. But the air still hums with peace. The living return home slowly, their eyes heavy with fatigue, but their hearts calm, for they have fulfilled their duty. The souls, having been fed with love and memory, depart content. And the living, having touched the unseen, carry that serenity into the new day. Long before the first church bells rang in the New World, the peoples of Mesoamerica played instruments of clay, bone, and reed. Their flutes mimicked the call of birds, their drums echoed the thunder of the mountains. They played not for entertainment, but for dialogue. Music was the speech of the gods. When someone died, songs were sung to accompany the soul on its journey. Melody was a light along the path to Mictlan. Centuries later, the instruments changed, but the purpose remained. During the Day of the Dead, music is everywhere. In the cemeteries, in the plazas, in the quiet corners of homes where candles burn. The sounds are both joyous and nostalgic. Guitars strumming old songs, violins weeping gently, voices rising in harmony like smoke through the night air. It is said that the spirits recognize these songs and come closer when they hear them. In many towns, musicians walk through cemeteries at midnight, playing serenades for the departed. They pause at graves, singing love songs once shared between living hearts. In Michoacán, mariachi bands perform Las Mañanitas for mothers who have passed. In Veracruz, Girana players improvise verses, naming the dead as though inviting them to dance again. And in every note, there is an understanding that music travels farther than words. It reaches the places where human speech cannot go, to that invisible realm where love still listens. There is a story told in Oaxaca of a man who played the guitar for his wife's grave every year. When he grew too old to carry the instrument, his grandson played for him instead. They said that one night, when the boy began the song, a second melody joined softly from the shadows. No one could see who played, but the sound was clear, a duet between the living and the dead. Whether true or not, it reminds us that remembrance is a kind of music. Two hearts playing the same song from opposite sides of time. If music carries the soul through sound, poetry does so through silence and rhythm. In every era, Mexicans have written verses about death, not as despair, but as dialogue. One of the oldest traditions is the calavera literaria, the literary skull. Short, witty poems that mock the living, imagining death, la muerte, arriving to carry them away. Perhaps a mayor too proud, or a scholar too serious, or a poet too vain. In the hands of the people, death becomes a playful character, always polite, always patient, always victorious, but never cruel. These verses are published in newspapers, recited in schools, pinned to altars, or scribbled on folded slips of paper. They remind everyone that death visits all, and that laughter, too, is sacred. In the quiet hours of November nights, writers and poets often sit by their altars to write. The soft flicker of candlelight becomes their muse. Some write letters to their ancestors, telling them about the year that has passed. Others compose poems in their honor, their words rising like prayers without sound. It is said that inspiration during these nights feels different, as though unseen hands guide the pen, as though the souls themselves whisper through the ink. Perhaps that is why so much of Mexico's greatest poetry speaks of remembrance, of return, of fire and flowers, the twin symbols of eternity. If poets write for the ear, painters write for the eye. Mexican art has long embraced death as its companion. In murals, engravings, and paintings, skeletons dance, play music, drink coffee, and wear elegant clothes. They do not haunt, they live. From José Guadalupe Posada's etchings to Diego Rivera's murals, to Frida Kahlo's dreamlike canvases, where life and death intertwine like vines. Each artist has added a new verse to the same long song. Their work is not about morbidity, but about truth, that beauty and decay share the same body, that to look at death with honesty is to love life more deeply. Frida Kahlo, the painter of pain and color, understood this truth better than most. In her paintings, flowers bloom beside skulls. Her own face appears both alive and dying, defiant and tender. She once wrote, "I paint flowers so they will not die." That perhaps is what every altar, every sugar skull, every marigold truly means. To paint, to sing, to write, is to insist that love will not fade, even when the body does. All across Mexico, artisans continue the work of keeping memory tangible. In Oaxaca, men and women carve alebrijes, bright, fantastical creatures painted in impossible colors, born from dreams and meant to guard the souls on their way home. In Puebla, craftsmen sculpt ceramic skulls glazed in turquoise and gold. In Mexico City, paper artists cut papel picado so delicate that a single breath makes it tremble. Decorations made not to last, but to flutter like the spirits they represent. Each artist works with quiet focus, knowing that what they make is not merely an object, but a gesture, a way of saying to the dead, "I remember you." Even the humblest crafts carry that same intention. A hand-drawn skull, a single candle in a window, a clay pot left on a grave. Every act of creation, no matter how small, is an offering. In Mexico, art is not reserved for museums. It lives in kitchens, in markets, in cemeteries, in the walls of homes built by generations of hands. Each brushstroke, each stitch, each note of a song extends the same quiet promise that no one will vanish into silence. Today, new generations of artists continue this legacy. They write songs that mix the sound of old guitars with electronic echoes. They paint murals on city walls, depicting skeletons in sneakers and La Katerina holding a smartphone like a mirror of time. They film documentaries, compose symphonies, design digital altars where names and faces appear in pixels of light. And though the medium changes, the message does not. Every piece still speaks the same sacred refrain. We remember. We love. We continue. Even the most modern voices carry the rhythm of ancient drums. Across Mexico, museums now curate exhibitions for Dia de los Muertos, but the true gallery is the country itself. Every street, every graveyard, every home during these days becomes a work of art. The people are both the artists and the audience. Each candle, each photograph, each echo of laughter is part of a collective masterpiece, one that cannot be bought or sold, only lived. In music and in remembrance, it is often the silence that matters most. The pause between chords, the breath before the next verse, the stillness after the final candle is lit. In that silence, the dead speak. Not in words, but in presence. A warmth that lingers, a calm that enters the heart. And those who listen carefully find that the silence is not empty at all. It is full, overflowing with memory, with gratitude, with love. The sacred hour when souls are believed to cross the threshold and step once more into the homes of those who remember them. It is not a haunting, but a homecoming. Not the chill of ghosts, but the warmth of love finding its way back. For in Mexico, death is not exile. It is a journey, and this night is the promised return. So close your eyes now, dear listener, and imagine it, the stillness before the first candle flickers, the world between worlds beginning to stir. The threshold, it begins with a whisper, a change in the air, the faint rustle of paper banners swaying in the dark. Dogs, it is said, sense it first. They lift their heads, ears pricking, eyes watching the empty doorway. A chill passes, not cold, but electric, the nearness of unseen company. The candles burn brighter for a moment, their flames leaning toward the door, as though greeting someone unseen. And then, quietly, it happens. The spirits return. They come not as shadows or specters, but as a feeling. A peace that fills the room, a warmth that softens the chest. A sudden memory so vivid, it feels alive. The boundary between life and death dissolves. like mist touched by sunlight. Outside, the marigold petals still form a glowing path, stretching from the doorstep to the street, each bloom a tiny sun guiding the way. In the old belief, souls travel along these golden trails, their steps silent, their movements lighter than the wind. The scent of the petals is their compass. They follow it through the night, through the fields, the alleys, the mountain paths, and the cities alive with light. Every road, every path, every petal-laden doorway leads to a single truth. That memory is the bridge across death. And tonight, that bridge glows brighter than ever. In homes across Mexico, families sit quietly by their altars. They speak softly, as though to someone sitting just across from them. They tell stories about the harvest, about births and marriages, about small triumphs and ordinary days. Some speak aloud, others simply think the words, but all believe the same, that they are being heard. A chair is left empty at the table. A plate of food rests untouched, a cup of chocolate still steaming. No one eats from it. It belongs to the guests who have traveled far, those made of memory and light. Sometimes, in the corner of a room, a candle flickers though there is no wind. A photograph tilts slightly, or the scent of an old perfume drifts faintly by. The living smile softly, recognizing the sign. They whisper, "Welcome home." The first to arrive, it is said, are the souls of children, the angelitos. They come at sunset on November 1st, drawn by the scent of sweets and laughter. Their altars are small, decorated with toys, tiny cups of milk, and sugar figurines shaped like animals. Parents light white candles for them, each flame representing a brief but eternal joy. It is a tender night. Soft lullabies are sung, and the air feels lighter, as if full of tiny footsteps. When the candles burn low, families whisper thanks, not for what they lost, but for what they were given, however briefly. And somewhere in the flickering light, you can almost hear children's laughter again, a sound made of innocence and remembrance, echoing softly through the years. When the dawn of November 2nd begins to pale the sky, the older souls arrive, the parents, grandparents, friends, and lovers. They come quietly, not with thunder, but with familiarity. Their presence is felt in the small things, the way the candlelight steadies, the faint creak of a chair, the comforting sense that one is not alone. Families speak to them as they once did in life, about the weather, about the harvest, about the world that has changed since last year. It is not mourning. It is conversation continued. And if one listens closely enough, perhaps one can feel the replies, not in sound, but in understanding. In the streets, the air grows thick with candle smoke and song. From house to house, the living and the dead coexist in a single, gentle rhythm. The music drifts through the alleys. Soft guitars, distant violins, and the faint laughter of neighbors greeting one another. Each light that burns tonight is not only for the departed, but for those who remember them. For remembrance is a two-sided mirror. The dead look into it from one side, the living from the other. And for one night each year, the reflection becomes one. Near midnight, the noise of the city quiets. Even the music softens. The air grows still, as though the whole world is holding its breath again. It is said that during this hour, the souls walk freely through the streets. Some visit their homes, others linger near churches or rivers. Some wander the markets where they once worked. They do not speak, but the living feel them, in the rustle of marigolds, in the hush before the dawn. This is the hour when the veil is thinnest, when love, unbound by flesh or time, flows freely between the worlds. And in that silence, there is no fear, only peace. In every corner of Mexico, the same fire burns, candle by candle, altar by altar. The flames flicker softly in clay holders, casting halos of light onto faces, onto photographs, onto food lovingly prepared. The smoke of copal drifts upward, carrying invisible offerings to the heavens. The people sit near it, some in prayer, some in silence, some simply watching the light dance. In those moments, you can see what the Day of the Dead truly is. Not spectacle, not sorrow, but communion. The living feeding the dead with memory, and the dead feeding the living with gratitude. As the first rooster crows and the night fades to gray, a gentle sadness passes through the homes. The candles have burned short, their wax pooling like morning dew. It is time for the souls to return. Families speak softly. Go in peace. We will meet again next year, one by one. The lights are extinguished. The marigold petals, now dry and curled, are gathered and carried away. But the rooms are not empty. They are filled with a calm joy, the afterglow of presence. The people step outside, the dawn cool on their faces, and they breathe deeply. The world feels wider, the heart lighter. Because in remembering the dead, they have remembered life itself. When the sun finally lifts above the horizon, its rays fall on the cemeteries still sprinkled with petals. Birds return, the city stirs, and smoke rises from the first morning fires. Children wake, grandmothers sweep the floor, and life resumes. But it is a different kind of life now, renewed by love, fortified by memory. The dead have gone back to their quiet world, but their essence lingers in the light. Every candle that burned through the night has left a trace of warmth behind. A gentle reminder that death is never the end, but a brief pause in an infinite song. In a world that hurries endlessly forward, the Day of the Dead invites us to pause. It asks us to look back, to breathe, to see the invisible threads that bind every heartbeat to those that came before. It reminds us that our days, however bright, however brief, are part of a vast, unbroken chain. Every smile, every kindness, every small act of creation becomes a bridge to eternity. To live with this awareness is to walk more gently, to speak more kindly, to waste less of the sacred gift of time. For the marigolds do not bloom forever, but their fragrance lingers long after they fall. Remembrance, too, is a form of life. When we speak the names of those who have gone, we give them breath again. When we tell their stories, we light candles in the darkness of forgetting. In Mexico, people say that there are 3 deaths. The first, when the body dies. The second, when it is laid to rest. And the third, the true death, when no one remembers your name. The Day of the Dead defies that final silence. It keeps memory alive through tenderness and ritual. To remember is to love across time, to keep company with those who cannot walk beside us anymore. And in that act, we ourselves are remembered. In most of the world, death hides in the shadows, whispered about, feared, kept far from the table. But in Mexico, death is given a seat beside the bread and the laughter. It is offered a drink, a story, a smile. The Day of the Dead teaches that to fear death is to misunderstand it. For death is not the enemy of life. It is its twin, its mirror, its patient teacher. When we learn to sit with death, we learn to value every fleeting breath. The marigold blooms more brightly because it knows it will wither. And in that knowledge is beauty beyond measure. There is a quiet wisdom in celebration. To celebrate those who have died is not to deny grief, but to honor the fullness of their existence. It is to say, you lived, you loved, and we are grateful. That gratitude transforms sorrow into color, mourning into song. It turns the cemetery into a garden of candles, the tears of loss into petals of light. Even in absence, there is abundance. Art, in all its forms, is a way of holding on to what cannot be touched. The Day of the Dead teaches us to express, to paint, to sing, to build altars not just of wood and cloth, but of imagination and soul. Every sugar skull, every cut of papel picado, every loaf of pan de muerto is a declaration of love strong enough to outlast time. Creation becomes prayer, and prayer becomes art. Life is fleeting, a candle that burns brightly and then melts away. But the Day of the Dead shows us that transience itself is what gives life meaning. A flower is beautiful because it fades. A song is precious because it ends. A life is sacred because it passes, leaving behind the fragrance of what was loved. When we accept impermanence, we stop clinging and begin to savor. We learn to see beauty in every passing moment. The laughter of a friend, the warmth of sunlight on a wall, the sound of rain against a window. To live this way is to live as the marigold does, brightly, fully, without fear of the night. The Day of the Dead is not only between the living and the dead, but between peoples, faiths, and centuries. It reminds us that every culture, no matter how different, shares the same longing: to be remembered, to be loved, to belong. The altars that rise each year are built not of one tradition, but of many: indigenous, Christian, modern, ancient. Together they teach that identity is not a boundary, but a meeting place. Just as the living and the dead find one another each November, so too can the divided and the different meet through understanding. We all leave something behind: a word, a gesture, a kindness unnoticed. The Day of the Dead invites us to think of what our own altars might hold one day. Will there be laughter in the memories we leave? Will there be peace? Will someone light a candle and smile? We cannot choose how long we live, but we can choose how deeply. We can decide, each day, to live in such a way that our light continues long after the flame is gone. Perhaps the most beautiful lesson of all is that love is cyclical. Every year the same petals are scattered, the same candles lit, the same prayers whispered. The souls return, and so does the understanding that we too will one day be among them. Not vanished, not forgotten, but waiting to be remembered, to be called home by someone else's voice. There is no tragedy in that, only completion. The circle closes and begins again. In the end, the Day of the Dead is not about the past. It is about presence. It tells us that the dead are not gone. They have simply become part of everything. They are in the warmth of the fire, the hum of the wind, the taste of food prepared with love, the laughter that rises unexpectedly from memory. They are not behind us, but around us. Every candle lit on an altar is a reflection of the same eternal flame. The light that passes from one soul to another, from generation to generation, never extinguished, only transformed. And now, dear listener, as we come to the end of this long and gentle journey, let us imagine one final candle. Its flame is steady, its wax nearly gone. It is burned all night, through music, through prayer, through the soft return of souls. This is the candle that belongs to you. It burns for your memories, your joys, your losses, your dreams. It burns for all that you have loved, and all that still waits quietly for you in the great circle of time. When you close your eyes tonight, Do not think of endings. Think instead of warmth, of how every light that fades becomes the dawn somewhere else. So rest now, dear listener. The marigolds have done their work. The souls have returned home. The air is clear again, yet still full of something unseen, the calm certainty that nothing loved is ever lost. May the eternal flame of remembrance burn quietly in your heart tonight. And when you wake tomorrow, may you carry a little of that light with you into your work, your laughter, your days, and your dreams. Because in the end, that is the true meaning of the Day of the Dead. That the line between life and death is not a wall, but a window. And through it, love passes freely. Good night, dear listener. Sleep peacefully in the glow of memory. And may the souls who watch over you smile from their side of the stars.